Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about abstract miniatures and the ultimate in abstract miniatures. All right, so I'm a big fan of using abstract miniatures, so I'm going to explain what this is. So basically, I think every game master, every dungeon master really has to decide, and actually, this goes straight to 5th edition, but the nice thing about abstract is you can use it well beyond 5th edition, right? Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. But if you're Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game master, you have a decision to make, right? You can go down the traditional miniatures road, right? And you can purchase traditional miniatures for your Dungeons & Dragons game. This is quite problematic. It is expensive. It takes a lot of storage, and it ramps up the cost on your game, essentially. Each session, each new era, all of this, it can become quite expensive, right? Now, if you have that kind of money, if you have that kind of time, if you have that kind of space, God bless you, right? But not all game masters do, right? So I, for one, there are options, right? So you can go down the traditional road. You can also go down the Pathfinder pawn set road. That's a really robust way. There's also paper minis now, right? But I'm a big fan of abstract miniatures, and what these are pieces of plastic or game pieces of wood or plastic, right, that are the size of miniatures that have different colors and differentiators on them, okay? And I've been doing this for a while. Some of my best representative miniatures, I actually some of the best representative miniatures I ever got were yellow and red and plastic pieces that came out of a Beat-em-on toy set, right? These are just really simple plastic squares, right? And this Beat-em-on set was for a Japanese toy where it had a little, like a gun, like a little mecha guy, and there would be a marble that would shoot out of his chest. But these plastic squares were set around the shooting robot men, right, as barriers. And so you could use them you could shoot them like targets, things like that. Really unusual. I got them on a super sale at Toys R Us when they were going out of business. And I use them all the time. They're really visible on the table, and they're just yellow and plastic pieces, square pieces of plastic. But they're exactly the size of a traditional Dungeons & Dragons miniature, right? And so I have a whole bunch of these. They're really excellent. I love to use them. They're very visible. And I could just set them on the table and say, the red represents this faction, the yellow represents this faction. And I did that for quite a while. I can't really recommend that to anybody because, they're very hard to find. But I absolutely can recommend buying old board games, especially board games that don't have all their pieces, because you can pull them out and get some really unusual miniature proxies, essentially abstract miniatures, right? So these are just very plain pieces of plastic or wood that are very visible to the eye, right? And that you can use. But just this last weekend, I found the absolute ultimate in abstract miniatures, and they are set dice. All right. So what are set dice? So set is a traditional board game. It's played with cards. Traditional board game, which is a card game, actually. And set is a pattern recognition game where you put down cards, right? And these cards have symbols, shadings, and numbers, and shapes on them, right? So the shapes are the tilde shape, the diamond shape, and the oval shape. The colors are red, green, and purple. Each of the card has a number of shapes on it. So it might have 3 ovals, 2 ovals, or 1 oval, or it might have 3 tilde, 2 tilde, or 1 tilde on it, right? And then in addition to that, each of the shapes are in a shading, right? And so those shadings are open, it's just the outline of the shape. Opaque, the shape is filled in, or shaded. There's like lines across the shape, right? So that's a lot of differentiators, right? Now, this game has existed as a card game for a very long time, right? And lots of math majors use this. It's for finding patterns, and what you do is you find sets. sets that are all sets that are have all of one attribute the same and all of one attribute different, right? So very, very unusual game, and it's a little complex, right? But they re-released this game not using cards, but using dice. So they took these symbols that come in different numbers. The numbers of symbols on each face is different, 1, 2, or 3. The number and the colors are different, red, green, or purple, right? And so what you can do is you get these dice, and then you could quickly set out 3 red tildes, right? But the tildes can have 1 tilde on each dice, or 2 tilde on each dice, or 3 tilde on each dice, right? Now, what I use these for is to quickly represent 3 separate factions, right? So this weekend I used it to represent a battle which my player characters were involved in, and for my player characters, they each have a traditional Dungeons & Dragons miniature, right? And that's really nice because you can tell the player characters very, very quickly, and this is a very big problem in Dungeons & Dragons games, where if you have Dungeons & Dragons, if you're playing a Dungeons & Dragons game, your player character miniatures can look very similar to the monster miniatures and things like that, and they can actually be hard to see on the table. But here, using abstract miniatures, we can use real miniatures for all the player characters and use these abstract miniatures for all the non-player characters, right? So I was able to quickly set down 4 humans, right? And I was able to set down 6 dwarfs, and I was able to set down another 6 elves, right? So purple for the elves, green for the dwarves, red for the humans, right? In addition to that, when I set them down, I would simply set the number of shapes to indicate the power of that person. So we were playing index card RPG in this particular circumstance, and so everything with 1 shape was a 1-hit monster, right? So any hit on that monster would destroy it, and then any dice that actually had 2 symbols on it, those had 10 hit points, right? And then any symbol with 3 symbols on it that had double, and they had 20 hit points, right? So this is a very fast way to set down factions onto the table very, very quickly, right? And actually differentiate between 3 different factions, and to give an actual power level for each of those non-player characters. And it's just a really quick way to differentiate between your NPCs, differentiate the power of the NPC itself and the faction of the NPC. Now, if you notice, I didn't even get to the point where there's 2 differentiators I didn't even use. I didn't use the shapes, and I didn't use the shadings, right? So I just did this last weekend, right? And immediately these dice were invaluable. In addition, some of the dice have a wild side that literally says wild, right? And so you can use that to indicate a leader of a faction, right? So all the same dice, you can indicate 3 different factions. You can indicate power level for every single NPC, and you can indicate 1 leader for the entire group, right? So or one non-player character that doesn't even belong to any of the groups, right? So it's just another differentiator. In addition to that, this is the system that I've already proposed. I highly recommend picking up these dice. They're very, for abstract miniatures, they're about the ultimate. Nothing I've seen has been faster. The dice themselves are perfect replacement size for traditional Dungeons & Dragons miniature, right? And it's really, really quick, really useful, and compared to traditional miniatures, it is fantastically versatile and equnomical. And that's another thing is, the nice thing about using abstract miniatures is because since they are abstract, right, these will fit equally well into a Cthulhu game. They will fit equally well into a science fiction game. They'll fit equally well into a fantasy-based game, right? Very, very fast, very economical, easy to carry, all of that, right? Now, I can hear many of you are like, oh, I don't really like idea. I love my traditional miniatures, right? The one thing I would ask you to think about, right, is just realize, you want to be the best game master you can be. You want to be the best dungeon master you can be, right? Well, one thing that I will tell you that there's no way to get around, the more you invest in miniatures, the more likely you are to railroad, right? So if you bought miniatures, this week, they're going to hit that specific monster whenever they come across it, right? And you limit the options for your players to choose to go in different directions in the world. A lot of game masters don't care about that kind of thing. They're gonna drag their players through whatever story that they wrote down on a piece of paper that week. But if you're one of these new type of game masters, ones who truly are dedicated to narrative, right? Dedicated to discovering the story rather than discovering the story that you and your friends can tell together, rather than fulfilling the story that was written in a pre-gen for you or that you wrote down that week, then abstract miniatures are really awesome. Give it a shot. Check out these set dice. You can get them pretty much any board. You can get them in board game shops, and of course, they are available online. That's my recommendation. I'd love to hear what you use for abstract miniatures, or why you don't use abstract miniatures. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.